Shabbat Shalom, Betham. Good Shabbos to you, dear friends. Thank you for joining with us this evening. Last night, we lit 2 candles. One for Zachor, remembering Shabbat, and one for Shamor, observing Shabbat. Last night, on the eve of the 20th anniversary of 9/11, we lit twin candles in remembrance of the Twin Towers, one for the North Tower and one for the South Tower, one for the Pentagon, one for the hundreds of firefighters, one for the hundreds of police, one for all the men and one for all the women, one for all the girls, and one for all the boys, and candles for the husband and wife who leapt out of the tower holding hands. One for our luck running out, one for the New York City skyline, one for the critically wounded, one for the survivors, one for the dead. One candle for the North Tower, one candle for the South Tower. Tonight, as Shabbat departs, the first Shabbat, mind you, of 5,782, we light not 2 separate individual candles, but one braided candle with many wicks. This is the essential nature then of Havdalah, that in a world gone mad with dangerous political and religious ideologies, with opposing military forces, with hate-mongering demagogues, with fanatical, barbaric extremists, there still remains the possibility of a new dawn, of a better and brighter tomorrow. Havdalah is the prospect of a different future, one in which war will be subdued, in which homelessness and hunger will be eradicated, in which plagues and sorrow will cease. Havdalah is the possibility of new imaginings, one in which different people with different feelings and insights, represented by the multiplicity of these wicks, will nevertheless be forged together into one combined humanity, represented then by this one multicolored, intertwined, interconnected candle. A candle of hope, a flame of faith, a spark of divinity. This is the glorious, wondrous dream of our people, united by shared expectations, embraced by an invincible love, protected by the prophecies of Eliyahu Hanavi. These are the blessings. This then is the brightness of Havdalah.
הנה אל ישועתי יפתח ולא אפחד, כי עזיב זמרתיה ויהי לי לישועה. ושאפתם בהם בששון מבעדך ישועה, לאדוני ישועה. על עמך ברכתך סלה. אדוני צבאות עמנו משגב לנו. אלוהי יעקב סלה. אדוני צבאות אשרי אדם בוטח בך. אדוני הושיע, המלך ימינו ויום קראנו. ליהודים חייתורה ושמחה וששון ויקר, כן תהיה לנו. כוס ישועת עשה, ובשם אדוני יקרא. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei perich hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei minei v'samim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei meorei ha'esh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamavdil ben kodesh lechol, ben or lechodesh, ben Israel la'avim, ben yom hashvi ולששת ימי מעשה. ברוך אתה אדוני,
ברוך ושמו,
כמבדיל בין קודש לחול. כמבדיל בין קודש לחול. חטאותינו עם חול. זרענו וכספנו ירבה הכל. והכהנים בלילה. שבוע טוב, 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 שבוע טוב. אליהו הנביא, אליהו הנביא, אליהו הגלעדי, במחרה וימינו יבוא אלינו, עם משיח בן דוד, עם משיח בן דוד. אליהו הנביא, אליהו התשבי, אליהו, אליהו, אליהו הגלעדי.
Thank you, Chazan and Betham. Even if it has to be in a virtual Zoom capacity, let's greet one another with a Shavua Tov and a Good Voch. The first Havdalah, therefore, for the year 5782. Shavua Tov to each and every one of you. God bless you. I want us to begin our 20th anniversary commemoration of 9/11 by invoking the memories of the 2,977 people who perished at Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan, at the Pentagon in DC, and near the town of Shanksville, Pennsylvania. This short, but we hope meaningful service is dedicated to each and every one of them. I'd like to begin our commemoration then this evening with a reading by Rabbi Jack Bloom in the name of those silenced on 9/11. We are the ghosts of 9/11. We lived and loved, ate and drank, and looked forward with eagerness and hope on that beautiful late summer day to a tomorrow that was not to be. Like each of you, we had a name. Not one of us was nameless. Those who loved us bestowed our names on us. By remembering our names, you remember us. We looked forward to hearing our name, knowing that you used our name to invite us, to join you for supper, to share your joys and your sorrows, to just be with you. That we can no longer do. But hearing our names gives us life and helps you remember the love we brought to your life. We lived and loved, ate and drank, worked and played, and awaited our tomorrows with eagerness and with hope. Our names were special to us, and above all, special to you who love us. We no longer live in love, but we can be loved and remembered by name. We are grateful to you for remembering and honoring our names on this anniversary of that gruesome day, 9/11. Hear our name and know for sure that we indeed did have a name. Some of us had even made a name for ourselves. With our name, we answered the summons to live and to love, to earn and to achieve. We brought pride to our names, responded to them, and hoped to live and pass them on to a new generation. We are no longer with you, yet by remembering our name, you make room for us in your heart and the memory of us among you who live on, so that those who follow us may in our name and our memory make the world a better and safer place. Let us not be nameless. Remember us by our name, you who love us and whom we loved in return. If you are a namesake of any of us, honor the name we share with a life of love and courage and kindness. We lived a life. We have a name. Do not forget us. Remember our name and our love for you and your love for us. As you hear our name, honor our name by creating a world of freedom and of love and of peace. We are those whose life was ended on 9/11 on a sunny, late summer day. Remember our names. Let us live in your memory. Betham, tonight we welcome, and I see them in their box, our very good friends, Lily and Paul Rothman, from their home in Las Vegas. And despite the vast distance that now necessarily separates us, Paul and Lily have been the most devoted members of Betham ever since they joined us over 17 years ago from Temple-Beth, Torah. Many of us are aware that Paul was an eyewitness to history. In fact, you might say that he had a terrifying front row seat that awful, tragic, catastrophic day. Over the years, he has spoken publicly about what it's like to be a survivor in every sense of the word. Paul, we thank you for being with us tonight and for agreeing to speak to us, albeit this year from a somewhat different point of view. Paul and Lily, Shavua Tov, you're welcome to now unmute Paul, and we thank you in advance for your remarks.
Well, Rabbi, to even think that I would not accept this opportunity to speak to all of our dear friends and what I consider to be our extended family back east, would be just a surprise. So I'm happy, proud to do it, and hopefully there is some merit to what I'm about to say. I call this presentation 20 Years of Memories. And while I could focus on the events that actually occurred on September 11th, I like to focus on what has happened since and what my life has been and what I would like to see happen over the next several years and on into the future. So for me, there are three areas of my memory. Those memories of my life prior to September 11th, 2001, those of that day on September 11th, and those of my life since that day. My life up until 9/11/01 was normal, and I have that in quotation marks. with the usual life cycle events, work, raising a family. I remember my bar mitzvah, graduation from high school and college, and my first job. I remember the social things like dating, getting together with friends, and family events like observances of the various holidays. I remember my meeting Lily, well, actually getting fixed up by my parents. I remember the courtship and the proposal of marriage on an apartment house parking lot. This is a funny story for another occasion. I have all of the memories of our marriage and the start of our lives together, living in that apartment house, and eventually moving to our house on Oakfield Lane, where we lived for 41 years and made so many memories. Robin's birth, celebrating her birthdays, her bat mitzvah, school activities, graduation from high school. And then she started college at the University of the Arts, and the next phase of my memory came into play. Robin had just graduated University of the Arts, or UArts, that June of 2001. That August, Lily and Robin unknowingly would see the World Trade Center for the last time when they picked me up to drive on a vacation to Cape Cod. While at work on September 11, 2001, Lily heard the news of the Trade Center attacks and went to call the family from her car. It was when I called her, I called her to tell her that I was evacuating the North Tower. I was on the 20th floor when my cell phone managed to get a call out from the fire stairs. While my coworkers and I were descending the fire stairs, one of my coworkers heard the radio report of a second plane hitting the South Tower. The idea of an accidental crash of a small plane into the North Tower had evolved to an accidental 767 off course to a coordinated terror attack on our country. Lily was on her way to pick up Robin at her Center City high-rise apartment building after recalling family, when I called again to tell her that I was safe at her friend Ellen's office building. Lily's day from that point on consisted of fielding calls from concerned friends and family and letting everyone know that I had survived the attack. As you can imagine, the events of that day are still clear in my mind. I have not lost, nor can I lose, the memories of the horrific experiences, the explosion, the swaying of the building, the smoke and diesel fuel smell, the descent down 74 flights of stairs, and what I saw as we passed by the windows looking out on the plaza, or the exodus of the building and the dust cloud that enveloped me on my escape from Ground Zero. I will never forget my trek from the Trade Center to Lily's friend Ellen's office, where I was taken in by employees at a neighboring office and told to use their phone to call and follow up with the news that I was okay, and then walking to Ellen's apartment. I can't forget the tearful greeting from Ellen, her taking me in and getting me cleaned up, the clothes borrowed from a friend. Nor can I forget watching the news videos of the attack and the collapse of the buildings at Ellen's over and over. It was so surreal, like a science fiction movie, as was the train trip home during which I saw the World Trade Center Twin Towers. I saw the smoke still rising from the smoldering ruins of what had been the iconic World Trade Center Twin Towers. I remember sitting next to a man who was visiting from Germany, and he stated that his country fully supported the United States and his country would fight terrorism alongside us. I guess it didn't register at the time, but many of the cars I saw on the parking lots at Princeton Junction, Jersey Avenue, and Hamilton Station belonged to people who would never return for them. My car was there waiting for me at Torresdale Station, but I don't remember driving home. The next chapter of memories involved the healing process, for which I needed much support and which I got from my friends, family, and clergy. When I came home to Lily, Robin, and my mother, I remember my mother saying to me, "Don't let this event defeat you. Stay strong for me." I remember the expressions of concern, the calls from Temple-Beth Torah Brotherhood members for weeks after the event, and every year on the anniversary of 9/11. Rabbi Andy started me off with a healing service that he asked me to speak at 3 days after the attacks. His request that I speak at the service was both to help the Temple-Beth Torah community deal with the effects of the event and for me to unpack my many emotions to help me heal. I was not alone in being affected by the attacks. One of our fellow congregants, Sylvia Safran of blessed memory, lost a relative on that day. At subsequent commemorative services, I have been supported and asked to participate in the remembrance of the events of 9/11 by Rabbi Cernovitz and Rabbi Lieb. I was even asked by a local chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. So now to the memories of the past 20 years. What do I feel after all this time? First, I think with gratitude for every day that I have lived since the tragedy occurred. So many families do not have their loved ones here to celebrate new memories. They must hold their memories of their loved ones dear to their hearts. Lily and I have celebrated life cycle events, including Robin's marriage, both of our retirements, planning and completion of many trips, including many trips with fellow Beth Omnics to Central Europe, Russia, and South Africa. We have made new friends and strengthened existing ones through these trips and through the annual observance of the holidays and the observance of 9/11. I get hugs, now they're virtual, and calls every year. As I am preparing this talk, I am constantly getting calls and messages expressing love and thankfulness for my survival. I thank you all, and I am sure that you know how much the love and support has meant to me these past 20 years. I hope to always be worthy of your love and respect. Lily and I have made helping others and staying involved in our community a focus of our lives, and hope to be able to stay involved as long as our health allows it. We've also made the enjoyment of art and culture the focus of our new lives here in Las Vegas. Lily is president of our community art club. I have been doing watercolor painting and photography of landscape that we see on our trip or our trips. The events we truly enjoy include the Las Vegas Philharmonic Orchestra concerts at the Smith Center, musical and dance performances at our local libraries, music shows and other theatrical productions at Super Summer Theater, an outdoor venue at Spring Mountain Ranch State Park, which show all the elements of talent, community support for the arts, and simple, good fun in a beautiful natural setting. I would love all of you to be able to come out and visit so that you can also experience this joy. After a year of sheltering in place, blessed with our daughter and son-in-law living and working in our home for a year, and grateful to give them shelter from New York City, Lily and I have broken out of the cocoon and traveled to the beautiful areas that we moved here to take advantage of. We made a visit to Sandy and Sheldon's home in Scottsdale, followed by a visit to the Grand Canyon, trips to Death Valley, Palm Springs, Lake Tahoe, Park City, Utah, and Gold Country in California. Our most recent trip was to San Diego, where we attended a concert of the San Diego Symphony at the newly opened Rady Shell. The all Beethoven concert at this venue, which is at the San Diego harbor side, shows that there is indeed beauty in this world and we must embrace it. The last part of that trip was to Laguna Beach, which is the home to the Pageant of the Masters, a must-see performance involving portrayal of paintings of the masters by live people who are embedded in and faithfully reproducing the mood and beauty of these works of art. The love and devotion that go into these unique creations bring tears to your eyes and give you the inspiration to create something beautiful. I only hope that someday my meager watercolor paintings approach the level of beauty that I saw at this performance. I would like to close with my thoughts on these past 20 years and what I have seen and what I would hope to see in the future. I have seen outpourings of love and friendship in my own life. It has allowed me to go on and strive for better things. Excuse me. Without friendship and love, we are really not complete human beings. Unfortunately, during these recent years, I have also seen too much hatred, too much evil portrayed against our fellow human beings and against our world. I constantly pray that we have the strength to endure these times and restore love and respect to our world. This is the only way we will survive. I pray that those who are resisting the protections recommended by our scientists learn to do the right thing so that we can return to normal lives. I am saddened by that resistance or defiance of the conspiracy theories and misinformation that is blocking this way forward. I, more than many, know how valuable life is and how we should be grateful to those men and women of science who are dedicated to ensuring that we are able to have another day and make it the best we can. I also know how important love and friendship are, and that love must win out over hate. Please, God, help us see this day, and may the memories of those we lost be for a blessing. Thank you. That's my comments.
Wow. Paul, all of us are so grateful for your presence with us this evening. Quite frankly, this short, but I hope powerful, meaningful commemoration would not be the same without your personal testimony. And when we spoke earlier this week, you're having mentioned how enormously grateful you are for this second chapter of your life. And you've described that most eloquently and most beautifully. And thank you for putting life's riches in the correct perspective for all of us. We're very grateful to you. To you and Lily, we send our love and our good wishes with the hope that sooner rather than later, we might be reunited, whether it's in Abington or whether it's in Las Vegas.
Any place is fine, as long as it happens.
God bless you. Amen to that. Amen to that. Lily, thank you for your constant and stalwart support of your beloved. And now Cantor, it was her idea, and I thought it was a beautiful one, at this particular juncture, is going to sing Yesh Kochavim, there are stars up above.
There are stars up above, so far away we only see the light. Long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. The memories keep shining ever brightly, though the time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember as we live our days. These are the days we remember. We remember. We remember. We
Dear friends, my oldest daughter, Haley, had admittedly a very different personal experience compared with that of Paul's, but one that was nevertheless so real and for her so devastating that it changed her life forever. And even though she is with us tonight, Haley preferred to pre-record her remarks, which Barry will now share with us. Thank you, Barry, and thank you, H, in advance.
Waking up before 5 a.m. was not something I enjoyed. I was 12 years old, just started at a new middle school. New friends were made, a new schedule was provided, and it took me weeks and many lessons to be able to finally open my locker. My mom drove me to school after I made a very important pit stop at Starbucks for my grande cafe mocha with soy milk. Along with my new middle school classmates, I was headed to an outdoor camping program to bond and get to know one another. Now, anyone who knows me will know that this isn't actually my idea of a good time. But nevertheless, I said goodbye to my mom and hopped on the bus that would take us to a campground in the middle of nowhere. At least that's what I called it. Before we left, our principal led us in a prayer to get to our destination swiftly and safely, and that we would use this time to bond and get to know the other students we had not really talked to or met before. I ended up sitting next to a new friend, and before we knew it, we were headed to our destination. We were on the New Jersey Turnpike. Friends were talking, listening to music, and catching up on all the latest middle school gossip. I had my head leaning against the side of the bus while I admired the New York skyline. The weather was absolutely picture perfect. It was around 8:45 a.m. on September 11th, 2001. As I looked at this beautiful shining city, I noticed a plane flying very low. 1 minute from then, my life and the lives of every American would be changed forever. At first, everyone thought it was a horrible accident. We watched as the tower turned into a ball of flames. Cars stopped on the side of the road as people stared in shock. Many were frantically calling family and friends, while some took out their cameras to catch this moment in time. As I stared out the window, I started bawling uncontrollably. What no one knew at the time was that my grandparents lived in the closest residential building from the towers. My great-grandma about 2 blocks away next to Stuyvesant High School, and 2 of my uncles worked by Wall Street, close to where my grandpa's law firm was. The Twin Towers were a place that I grew up in. My sister and I would walk to the Borders bookstore on the bottom level and then frequent the Krispy Kreme donut just a few doors down. I would stand in line at the ticket counter with my grandpa to buy discounted tickets to Broadway shows. I knew this area and knew how close my family was. Some of the teachers and my friends tried to calm me as I shook in fear. Not long after, we watched the second plane hit. The teachers knew almost automatically that this was no accident. We ended up sitting on the turnpike for what seemed like forever. A friend turned on his radio to try and get more information on what was happening. Then the unthinkable happened. The tower fell right before our eyes. I cried out to the adults, explaining that is where my grandparents lived. They couldn't quite believe me at first. After all, Lower Manhattan was thought to be just a business district. Scores of police, fire, and EMT vehicles soared past us, trying to make their way into New York City. Not long after, we watched the second tower fall. It was a horrific, almost movie-like scene as we watched the black plume of smoke cover Lower Manhattan. I wept uncontrollably. After witnessing what just took place, there was no question in my mind that something awful had happened to my family. After some time, our bus was finally able to make it to a rest stop. I watched as people cried, calling their loved ones, not being able to process what was taking place. I ended up physically sick from what I had just witnessed. My principal asked us to gather together. I'll never forget him explaining what just happened will change this world forever, that this was an attack on the states. We would never quite be the same. We needed to head back to PA to be with family. Eventually, my mom was able to get through to my principal to let him know that my family was okay. But after what I had just seen take place, I couldn't quite believe that. As soon as we got back to school, I found my mom. Sobbing uncontrollably, I held on tight, trying to make sure everyone was okay. As for my family in New York, my grandparents, uncles, and the people that worked for their law firm all huddled up in their apartment. Once the towers fell, they started walking through the rubble toward where my great-grandma lived. As they approached, everyone from her building was being loaded onto a bus to escape Lower Manhattan. My grandparents and uncle ended up walking, being pulled into a building with firemen and police who had heard about another building attached to the towers falling. They were among the last civilians to leave the area, walking for a long time until eventually they hitchhiked a bus that was headed for the George Washington Bridge. Once they arrived, they found out that the bridge had been closed to a bomb threat. They ended up leaving the bus and walked across the bridge to meet my aunt who was waiting for them on the other side. This past summer, after speaking to my uncle for the first time about his experience, I learned that on that day he decided to go into work early. He always took the train to the Twin Towers and then walked to work. If he hadn't have left early that day, he would have been in the towers when the planes hit. It has been almost 20 years, but in many ways that day seems like it was just yesterday. I want to make one thing perfectly clear. While this was and still is a traumatic event that my family and myself lived through, there's not a single day that goes by that I don't recognize how fortunate we are that everyone we know and love made it out okay, while so many other families lost a piece of their heart. I wish I could say I was a super resilient human who has been able to push past these memories and not let them get to her. Hence, I am not that person. For many years, I rarely talked about that day. Every once in a while, I would talk to my grandma as I cried in her arms. I cried for 12-year-old Haley, but also cried for what my grandparents, my uncle, and my great-grandma had to go through that day. I see pictures or videos of places and streets that I knew and couldn't help but to think of the pain of what they had witnessed, the unspeakable tragedy that they had just literally walked through. A piece of innocence left me that day. The world around me no longer felt safe. My family will be the first to tell you that I'm jumpy, easily triggered by sounds of low-flying planes or doors slamming shut, and never want to watch anything or listen to anything having to do with 9/11. I often held most of the pain of that day inside, rarely sharing my memories with others. Each anniversary has been hard, and I tried in my own ways to deal with my feelings until about 5 years ago. One Saturday night, I decided to rent a movie that looked happy and carefree. Towards the end of the movie, I saw one of the main characters walking in Lower Manhattan, past a big orange block statue just next to where my grandparents lived. Next thing you know, a teacher is shown writing the date on the board, 9/11/2001. A shot of the main character showed him looking out past the window as the camera panned out. He was standing in one of the towers. I felt my body start to shake as I witnessed a scene of papers and debris flying toward the screen. I had what I can only explain as my first ever panic attack. It was after this day that I knew I needed help and started going to therapy. It has been a painful process, but I realize how important mental health is. There have been and still are many times that I feel guilty for the way I feel. After all, I wasn't there that day. I didn't have to experience what my family and so many others experienced, and thank goodness my loved ones ended up being okay. I feel ashamed for the fact that this trauma has so deeply affects me still to this day, while others who escaped seem to be able to move past the pain. Thanks to the type of therapy I've been doing, it has helped me to realize that everyone processes trauma differently. Your brain literally changes after witnessing or going through trauma, and that it is not my fault for the way I feel or for the triggers I experience to affect me the way they do. 20 years have passed, and now as a 32-year-old, I have more of an understanding of what I was an eyewitness to. I now know the word terrorism, unlike the naive 12-year-old I was on that day. It never would have dawned on me that I was watching the lives of thousands of people end right before my eyes. I struggle with this thought, and it brings tears to my eyes and an ache in my heart. I also can't help but think of the thousands of people who escaped from the towers and lower Manhattan, and what their families must have endured and continue to endure. In a sense, the events of that day are like a scar. The initial trauma that caused the scar happened, but as the years pass, that scar is still there. You don't always think about it, but when you look at the scar, it's a reminder of the trauma that caused it in the first place. For me, time hasn't healed all wounds. I hope that one day it will become easier, but for now, I take each day as it comes and remember how lucky I am that my family made it out.
I'm Betty's showing a heart. Thank you for that, Betty. Thanks, H. I'm actually friends. I'm in the basement alone. Randy, Haley, and Aviva and her boyfriend Seth and my in-laws are upstairs. And I do want to recognize my in-laws, Joan and Shelley Goldstein, who, as you heard, had to evacuate their apartment for several months before they could return, given the fact that they lived in such close proximity to ground zero. Thanks, H, for your moving testimony, and like Paul, for your courage and for your strength and your stamina. We're going to listen to the cantor's rendition of Hine Ma Tovu Manaim, Shevet Achim Gam Yachad.
Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you. Friends, as we bring this commemoration to an end, I'd like the privilege of sharing with you two readings attributed to Alden Solovoy, who has become the Poet Laureate for the Union for Reformed Judaism. And I really endorse his remarkable website, To Bend Light, one word, to bendlight.com. At the Hand of Terror, a 9/11 memorial prayer. Creator of all, source and shelter, grant a perfect rest under your tabernacle of peace to those who died in the 9/11 attacks on the United States. Remember the works of their hands and the message of their hearts. Grant their families peace and comfort for your name's sake and for the sake of those who perished. Bring an end to violence and terror, bimhera v'yameinu, speedily in our own days. May their memories be sanctified with joy and with love. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life, a living blessing in our midst. For the 9/11 survivors. God of the survivor, God of the mourner and the witness, grant solace and peace to those still held by physical, emotional, and spiritual distress from the attacks of 9/11. Release them from visions of death and destruction, from guilt or shame, from fear or anger. Bind their wounds with your steadfast love. Lift them on your wings of kindness and grace. Blessed are those who have found peace. Blessed are those without tranquility. Blessed are those who speak. Blessed are those who stay silent. Blessed are those who have healed. Blessed are those who suffer. Blessed are those who forgive. And blessed are those who cannot forgive. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, source of strength for survivors of violence and tragedy in every land and in every age. Blessed are you, Tzur Yisrael, Rock of Israel, source of hope and of comfort. And let us say, Amen.
I hope everyone can join with me in singing Oseh Shalom, our beautiful prayer for peace. Peace not only for Israel, but for the whole world. And I'm going to use the melody that probably everyone knows, so everyone in their own homes can join in and our voices can raise together to plea for peace for every human being on earth. Oseh Shalom bimrama, Hu yaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'yimaru Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Dear friends, this concludes our commemoration of the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Cantor and I thank Paul Rothman and Haley Lieb for having the strength and the wherewithal to be able to share their personal testimonies with us tonight. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, H. And thank you for the heart. Our thanks as well to Barry Tinkelman for hosting this evening's program, and our thanks to all of you for having joined with us. We bid you, dear friends, Shavua Tov and Gamar Chatima Tova. In the countdown now to Yom Kippur, may you and all those you love be sealed for good. Good night.